I rise to state that the Labour Party will support the motion of no confidence in Minister for Defence, Deputy Willie O'Dea, and we will oppose the motion that has been proposed by the Taoiseach. The Labour Party has no confidence in this government as a collective entity or in the ministers in their individual capacities. This is the Fianna Fáil government that has brought this country to the brink of economic ruin. This is a government that has allowed unemployment to climb to unprecedented levels and permitted emigration to return to levels not seen since the 1980s. This is a government that has presided over massive job losses at Dell, which is in Minister O'Dea's own constituencies, at Waterford Crystal and in many other plants without taking any kind of meaningful action to try and save these jobs. This is a government that has failed to take the required action to save jobs at SR Technics, and which has subsequently made such an absolute and utter mess of the offer by Ryanair to provide up to 500 highly skilled jobs at Dublin Airport. This is a Fianna Fáil government that remains totally indifferent in the face of a forecast from FOS that the numbers out of work will increase by 87,000 in the coming year, and a warning from the Irish Bank Officials Association that as many as 10,000 jobs could go in the banking sector. And of course, they did nothing even to try and save the jobs in Bank of Scotland Ireland. This is a Fianna Fáil government that has placed a financial millstone around the necks of not just the current generation of taxpayers, but of Irish taxpayers for generations to come. This is a government that wrote a blank cheque for the banks when it agreed in an as yet unexplained circumstances on the night of September 30th, 2008 to provide a blanket guarantee for the banks, exposing the taxpayer to a potential liability of €440 billion. This is the same government that manoeuvred to avoid a full parliamentary inquiry into the banking crisis and instead forced through a private, behind-closed-door limited inquiry that specifically excludes the events of September 30th from its limited terms of reference. This is the same Fianna Fáil government that in every year of its record since 1997 has placed the interests of bankers and developers above those of the ordinary taxpayer. This is the same government that has handed over €4,000 million to Anglo-Irish Bank and another €7,000 million to Allied Irish and Bank of Ireland. This is the same government, led by a Taoiseach, who has indicated that he is prepared to write any cheque, no matter what the cost, in order to rescue the bankers. This is a Fianna Fáil government whose determination to leave no stone unturned to bail out the developers is in stark contrast to their indifference to the tens of thousands of families who are living in fear of losing their homes because the breadwinner has lost his or her job. This is the same Fianna Fáil government that has failed to provide the people with the decent health service they deserve. Only last week, the Controller and Auditor General reported that there had been a major increase in the number of people waiting more than 12 hours in A&E units for admission in the first 5 months of 2009 when compared to the same period in 2008. This is the same Fianna Fáil government that has taken the unprecedented step of cutting the welfare payments of the blind, widows and those with disabilities. The same government that has cut the pay of poorly paid public servants on 2 occasions in the past month. Faced with the choice of taking some extra tax from super high earners or hitting those on welfare or low pay, there's never any real issue for this Fianna Fáil government. And make no mistake about it, this is a Fianna Fáil government, and it is a misnomer to refer to it as anything else. It is not a coalition government in any accepted sense of the term. We know from the revealing statements made by former Senator De Burca that Fianna Fáil has little regard for the Green Party, that it can casually renege on agreements made, and that it is quite prepared, in the phrase attributed to Minister Gormley, to shaft the Greens whenever necessary. This is a deadbeat government, led by a Taoiseach who failed even to live up to the low expectations of even his opponents, and which is made up of ministers who are now demoralised, disenchanted and disillusioned. They have nothing to offer the Irish people other than more years of bungling and incompetence. The best service that they could now offer to the Irish people is to submit themselves to the verdict of the electorate, to allow for a change of government and direction, to give others the opportunity to undo the damage they have caused, and to clear the way for a process of recovery and reconstruction to begin. Minister O'Dea, as a member of the Cabinet, must accept his share of the responsibility for the economic damage and social destruction that Fianna Fáil have wrought on the people of this country. But of course it is another matter of enormous importance and significance that has led to the tabling of the motion of no confidence in Minister O'Dea. Leaving aside the broader issues I have referred to earlier, there are two reasons why I believe that the House should now express no confidence in Minister O'Dea. The first is that he made an absolutely scurrilous and unfounded allegation about a political opponent in his constituency, an allegation that he was subsequently forced to admit was totally and utterly without foundation. The second is that he swore an affidavit that contained a blatant untruth. And just what was the allegation made by the Minister against Councillor Quinlivan? In his interview with the Limerick Chronicle, Minister O'Dea claimed that Councillor Quinlivan was involved in some way in the operation of a brothel in Limerick. Do you know the brothel they found in his name and his brother's name down in Clancy Strand? That's the quotation. That's what he asked the journalist conducting the interview. It is difficult to think of a more serious, more scurrilous and more potentially damaging allegation that could be made against a political opponent. In his personal explanation to the House last night, Minister O'Dea said, and I quote, "I have never said that I lied on oath, as I was never on oath," end quote. But an affidavit is sworn evidence, given on oath, and is the equivalent of evidence given on oath in the witness box. My understanding is that any person making a sworn affidavit to the High Court must do so in the presence of a Commissioner for Oaths. The Commissioner then reads over the affidavit to the person making it, who will then be asked whether to agree or disagree with its content. If you agree with its content, you take the Bible in your right hand and you swear to Almighty God, or alternatively affirm that the affidavit you have sworn is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The same rules apply to evidence, must apply to everyone, regardless of your rank or position in Irish society. Minister O'Dea wants us to examine his swearing a false affidavit only from the point where his barrister made an agreement with Councillor Quinlivan's barrister, an agreement duly reported to the court. Councillor Quinlivan's reasons for accepting an amount in damages and his costs in return for agreeing a settlement statement is entirely a matter for Mr Quinlivan. The issue that affects Minister O'Dea's fitness to be a minister is why he swore a false affidavit to the court in the first place that caused the court to dismiss Mr Quinlivan's application for an injunction to stop the minister repeating his charge that Mr Quinlivan was associated with running a brothel. Mr O'Dea swore he never made any such allegation. He maintained this position until the journalist to whom he had peddled this falsehood produced the tapes. Faced with the incontrovertible evidence, the minister asks us to believe that he acknowledged his error. He forgot. How could he forget? How could you forget, Minister O'Dea, creeping around Limerick, alleging a rival candidate was running a brothel? How could anyone forget making such a charge? Would any other member of the House stoop to making such a charge in the first place if it were untrue? Is it acceptable behaviour for any member of this House, whether a minister or not, to use a political campaign to slander a rival candidate and to implicate him in particularly grubby criminal behaviour? Not only did Deputy O'Dea have no qualms about imputing criminal conduct to a political rival, he had no regard for the integrity of the journalist to whom he whispered his lies. Only when the journalist sought to defend his integrity by producing the tapes did Mr O'Dea remember his mistake. The only explanation for Minister O'Dea forgetting that he called a rival a brothel keeper, the only explanation for you forgetting to call a rival a brothel keeper is that it is pretty commonplace for you to make charges like that. And I'm frankly amazed that the Taoiseach should seek to retain in Cabinet a man who wilfully committed perjury. If this happened in the neighbouring jurisdiction, a Cabinet Minister wouldn't last until the end of the day. Deputy O'Dea is, as he is fond of telling us, a barrister and an officer of the court and knows well the implications of swearing a false affidavit. Members of this House have ended up in the criminal courts for matters less grave than swearing a false affidavit. Loyalty can be an admirable quality, but the Taoiseach's loyalty now to Deputy O'Dea in this instance undermines any claims he has that he will enforce decent standards in his government. And listening to Minister Ryan, I think we can all now agree with former Senator de Burca that she was right. The Green ministers will dance to any and every Fianna Fáil tune. Is there anything that the two Green ministers will not do to stay in office? Minister Ryan offered us a chronological description of what Minister O'Dea says happened. Is this the Greens' new standard? To parrot Minister O'Dea's excuse. Where now are the high standards that the Greens had called for so many times? And Taoiseach, can I say this to you? I like the Greens. I like Green politics. I have respect. Why is that not an unfamiliar feeling, Pat? Taoiseach, I want to say this to you. You know, it is one thing for you not to take the Greens seriously, to have them as not just as passengers but as some kind of hitchhikers in government. But frankly, you should stop humiliating them. And to have dragged Minister Ryan in here to say things that he didn't believe. Frankly, I felt embarrassed for it. This is a disreputable chapter that brings this House into disrepute if a majority in the House supports this kind of conduct by a minister. What standards will now apply to this House if a minister can plead honest mistake because he supposedly forgot giving an interview connecting a political rival to brothel keeping? Minister O'Dea is not just any minister. He is a minister with political responsibility for the Defence Forces who discharge certain security functions on behalf of the state. Deputy O'Dea was previously a Minister of State at the Department of Justice, and if my memory serves me correctly, was on occasions delegated the full functions of the Minister for Justice when the senior minister was out of the country. An allegation of having sworn a false affidavit would be a serious matter for any minister. In the case of Minister O'Dea, the allegation is of such seriousness that it renders him unsuitable to hold the office that he now occupies.
Deputy Jones.